Powell, and I serve as the chair of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being held remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Jacqueline Lightcap.
Here.
Allison Bell.
Here.
Kelly Harrison. Emily Kessler has indicated that she cannot be here today. Pamela Neidert.
Here.
Christy Marie Steele.
Here.
Stephanie Wiley. Mike Williams. Alice Zhang.
Here.
I also note the following BSRB staff members are present: David Fye.
Here.
And Leslie Allen.
Here.
All right. Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
Thank you, Linda. This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or COMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting as no individuals requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely, I state for the record the following information. Access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. While we are conducting this meeting remotely, the requirements of COMA are not suspended. As such, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the COMA. On April 23rd, 2024, we sent notice of the meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of such meeting. The notice was also posted on the board's website at bsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other media materials have been posted on the board's website on the day and are available for your review. You may also request a copy of the agenda by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we experience any technical issues during the meeting, you may send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And I did check the conference call line before we got started. There's no one currently on the line, but I'll let you know if someone joins the meeting as we proceed. And as I was going through the introductory information, Mike Williams also joined the meeting, so he is present now as well.
Okay, thank you, David. So the meeting is now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on the agenda, which is the call to order or the agenda approval. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Oh. Pam Neidert made a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Alice Zhang seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. The agenda is approved. Now would you all please look through the minutes from the previous meeting, and when you're done, I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend, followed by a second.
I move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Do I have a second?
Christy Steele, second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Can I know that we already approved the agenda, but in really reading through the minutes from the last time, that jurisprudence exam was supposed to move forward to this discussion. Can we add that under old business?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay. Do I have to take a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I think I can roll that into the executive director's report unless you want to add it as a specific item. But
I don't think so, because we can ask questions about that. Yeah, I think that'll be fine.
Okay. Great.
All right, motion carries. So now I'd like to invite David to give us his executive director's report.
Okay, thanks, Linda. And I'll start off by mentioning the jurisprudence item. So basically, I've had a discussion with the advisory committees recently. In other states, some of the professions that we regulate have a required jurisprudence examination as a requirement for licensure. Sometimes when individuals are coming from another state, it's a helpful tool to make sure that someone coming into another state to practice is knowledgeable about the laws and requirements. And so, yeah.
That's my question, because I had to go out and look it up. Does everybody know what a jurisprudence exam is? And I think it's a state or entity or whatever specific examination or knowledge of the laws and regulations that govern a profession. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Broadly speaking, David.
Right. It could go towards a specific, scope of practice or statutory requirements for licensure. It could get into the topics of unprofessional conduct, one state to the next, but it's intended to make sure that, if you're going to be practicing in a state, that you're knowledgeable about the laws and requirements of that state.
Yeah.
And some states have a requirement that you have to pass that as a requirement for licensure. So, there's a separate licensure examination usually for most of the profession, but this would sort of be, to become an attorney, there's a professional responsibility exam that has to be passed in addition to passing the bar exam. And so there's two different tracks. But for not all states, they don't all require passage of a jurisprudence exam. But part of the role of the BSRB is licensing and regulation of the professions, and most of our focus is on making sure people who apply for licensure go through that track. But we're also charged as a public protection agency to investigate complaints against practitioners. And so we do see the harm that occurs when things go poorly. And we have part of our mission is to make sure that we're protecting the public. And part of that is, having conversations about being proactive and what steps can we take to make sure that people aren't bad actors, or they don't inadvertently harm people because they're unaware of the requirements or the statutory framework in Kansas. And so we've had some board members recently talk about, should Kansas at least consider the idea of requiring a jurisprudence examination? And we've collected information from professional counseling. As an example, we met with a provider of a jurisprudence examination for that profession. Some of the complicating factors, though, is that in some states, the jurisprudence exam can be a little pricey. There's one company that provides them and charges about $100 to take the jurisprudence examination. And they would score that, and then they would give you a score, and there'd be a threshold which you'd have to meet. Other states have it set up differently, where they have sort of a learning module where you will have to answer questions, but it's sort of to teach you that if you don't get a correct response on a question, it will either instruct you what the correct response should be, or it will keep giving you questions until you get enough of those questions correctly. So, and some of them say you have to pass it the first time you get licensed. Others say you have to do it every time you renew. The complicating thing for the BSRB is, we don't want to make becoming licensed too difficult, because we are trying to be conscious of the concerns about workforce. but we also want to make sure that we're doing our job in terms of protecting the public. And we understand too that one of the initial issues with becoming licensed is people are not out there practicing yet. They're not earning money. So any kind of costs are something we want to make sure are not too high. And even though this would not be something the BSRB would collect, it is still something that applicants would need to consider. So we had some internal discussions and we wanted to propose something to the advisory committees and to the board, sort of thinking outside the box and providing an alternate solution to get at the right behavior we want to motivate. And so the approach that we were proposing was, instead of making an examination that is required, instead, we thought this might be something the BSRB could do as a service to the profession. And perhaps we could do it as hour-long webinars that we would do live. And essentially what we would do is we would do a separate one for each of the profession. We would promote it, and we would put together questions similar to what you would see on a jurisprudence examination, but ask individuals who are licensees, or we've also heard some students may be interested in doing this as well. But essentially there are companies that would allow you to log in and answer these questions live. And so after individuals put in their responses, then we could kind of talk through, well, here is what the correct answer is, and we could treat it like a learning opportunity and offer these as webinars. And instead of making it a requirement with a fee, we could offer this for free and give people an hour of continuing education when they complete this. And so thought it might be a nice way to use the carrot approach versus the stick and motivate the positive behavior we want in a way that could be sort of a nice benefit to licensees. And so this is what I've been talking to each of the advisory committees about. I thought I would see what your thoughts were. Perhaps the next step after, if this does get traction, if we have a number of licensees that would find this helpful and would appreciate the free hour of CE, perhaps we could even establish a threshold criteria score, and then individuals who score at that mark or above, we could show some recognition to on our website to kind of promote that as well. So wanted to kind of talk through this with you and see what your thoughts were on a proposal like that for an alternate jurisprudence type examination. By the way, I'm not familiar with any other state that has taken this approach, so this is definitely outside the box, but I thought this is something that we could figure out and that we could do, and I thought it might be better received and helpful and face less opposition, but still get at what we want to have happen here. So do you have any thoughts on that proposal? Just wanted to bring it to you and see if you had any comments or thoughts on that.
Just quickly, I like, first I'll say I like that a lot, actually. Quick, just to make sure I'm following. It would be required of all licensees, but just offered as a learning opportunity, not as like an exam, or it's optional for everyone.
It's optional for everyone. It is not going to be a requirement. We're not going to seek to change the statutes to make it a requirement. This is kind of, I was thinking about all the knowledge that people put out there for live trivia that people do sometimes, and people get together, and sometimes people even study those topics that are obscure. But it's fun, and perhaps we could take this approach and make this fun and give people the opportunity to learn more about the laws of their state and do these requirements, but also the benefit of the CE hour. We thought that might be a good motivator as well. So we wanted to kind of work with the licensees, and we heard from some members of other advisory committees that were in education. They thought their students might really benefit from this too. So totally optional. That's the approach we would like to take. We'd like to promote it. Hopefully we'll get buy-in from people who would just choose to do this and then kind of see what happens from that.
Yeah, and CE as far as the BSRB is concerned for licensure CEs, but from the behavior analyst side of things, the BACB, if it counted as a CEU for BACB, particularly professional and ethics CEU, that would be highly coveted. That's and people are looking for those, particularly in ethics and professional. So that I would think is a very valuable carrot for behavior analysts.
I agree, Pam. I like the idea of the ethics CEs for sure.
Well, and to me, it seems like it was something that would definitely qualify under our requirements for continuing education in terms of ethics. And
Yeah, I can't imagine it wouldn't qualify under BACB either. So I'm assuming it doesn't already exist, right? The module would need to be created. Any idea of that? What would be involved in that process?
So I've done some research on this, and we haven't, entered into an agreement with any companies or anything, but there are companies out there that are set up for people to essentially host live trivia. And I was thinking about this as a tool, and I was thinking, well, if we plug in our questions that way and get people to sign in and then do the responses, we could treat it like a webinar and they could enter their responses, and we could track their attendance by making sure that they're responding to these questions throughout the time frame. That way they can guarantee that they didn't just sign in and leave. So we can track their attendance that way too. And then at the end, basically the way that we can verify and provide documentation to them would be essentially their score on this. And so I think like I said, I haven't used this technology before, but it looks like it already exists for that purpose. And I think we could use it for our purpose as well. And maybe I can contact them and get a few more details on that. But we're not trying to create anything new technology wise, but I think the items are already out there and we can just use it for this purpose.
Slido is one that you can look into, David. That's the one that, we've used it for CEs and stuff. And it tracks attendance, it tracks scores, it tracks all of it. And there's like a little competition that goes along with it too, which is cool. So.
I like that too. How do you spell that?
SLIDEO.
Okay.
I think.
It's SLID period O.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Christy.
Okay. Yeah, I really thought, this could be, I don't like the idea that we're going to run head to head with any groups trying to do the right thing, but I thought this could be just kind of a unique approach that would help get people on board voluntarily. But in my experience, that most of our licensees want to do the right thing, and if you kind of give it into a way that would be a nice incentive with the CE, perhaps that would be a nice approach. So.
And
Awesome.
along the similar lines of the development process, the actual question, the content of the module, does that exist already, or that would need to be created by someone?
That I will probably need some help with. And I thought maybe if this is something the board thinks would be a good idea, and it sounds like the board has been receptive from the other conversations I've had with advisory committees, I might just reach out to some of you as advisory committee members. I'll talk with our investigators to kind of identify some of the main violations or areas of confusion where people have encountered issues there. There's also some certain rules that I've known people may have a little bit of confusion as well. And then in terms of the phrasing or turning those into good questions, I'll probably reach out to some of you and just get your assistance. We probably can't do them with the entire group or the majority of the group, because if we do it in a public meeting, anybody who watches, it would all be out there. But I appreciate all the work that you do. So if you don't mind, a few of you just kind of volunteering, I'd be happy to reach out to you and get your thoughts on some of those.
David, is that something that Kanzaba might be able to help with, like partnering with that? Because we have, not to volunteer Christy, but we do have CE. We have like a whole committee around that. So.
Yes, you can volunteer me. I was going to say the same thing, is that
Cool.
if you don't want to become a BACB ACE provider just to offer this one
Right.
CEU opportunity, I think a Kanzaba collaboration makes sense.
I think that would be
And to
really
get the word
cool
out too.
Yeah, I agree, Chrissy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And one of the things that, when you think about the BACB CEs versus like the general kind of CEs that are out there, we would really want to make sure that we craft them in such a way that we're talking about cultural contingencies or, something so that it does satisfy the requirements of the BACB so we can legitimately offer that CE opportunity. So, it's good to see Pam and Christy and Allison. That was a great idea about Kansaba. I don't know why I didn't think of that. But yeah.
I really like the idea of a learning module. Everyone learns differently, and so some folks may prefer the webinar. I like the idea of a learning module. Some folks may just want to read the guidelines and then take a quiz. So I think the more options we can offer that are like as feasible would be great. My two other thoughts are that I think it would be good to do this after the revised unprofessional conduct guidelines are released, so we're not changing things up midstream. And then also for the webinar, especially because you'll have folks engaging live, is knowing like how and what folks will answer in regards to like if they have questions about the unprofessional guidelines, like what if in this scenario, or what should I do here? What does this mean? Because I know we've had those conversations revising them, and I don't feel that I could, that I'm an expert in how those would be interpreted, or, the intent behind every like item in those guidelines. So thinking about that ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I also just want to add, this is a wonderful idea. I love it. Just because developing the model and everything probably involves some technology. Just want to make sure that we are, complying with the accessibility requirements and everything. So yeah.
That's a good point too. I'll reach out to the Office of Information and Technology Services. They help us with our IT to make sure that we're looking into accessibility as well.
Well, I just want to let you know that when David first presented this topic, I told him we're going to turn him into a behavior analyst yet.
Yeah,
That'll be his next profession.
this proposal first occurred to me when we were attending the conference for behavior analysts, and learning about different ways to motivate behavior, and things just started lining up. So yeah.
Isn't that fun, you guys? That is just so fun.
That's awesome.
I mean, Linda has converted many a person in the state of Kansas, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities.
Thank you, Allison. That's funny. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all your feedback, and I will take this back to the board. Most of the advisory committees we were able to talk to at the previous meeting, but a couple of them we were talking to this go around with the advisory committees. But I'll take your comments and the feedback and bring it back to the board, and we'll start looking at what steps we can take to get this prepared, and hopefully launch this sometime later this fall.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything else in your executive directors? Because we were like right in the middle of your report.
That's true.
Sorry.
No, that's right. It's okay. And I'll keep this kind of condensed. I've been trying to shorten my report a little bit, so I'll just highlight some of the items. But I'll mention too, every full board meeting, I have sort of a lengthy executive director's report, and there's more of a published document with some different items on that as well. So if you ever want more information on some of these topics, that's a good, all of those are broadcast on the YouTube channel. You can go and kind of watch that part, or just go to the website and take a look at that agenda or the items that are listed. But I'll highlight just a handful of items. In terms of some operating updates, the BSRB has a new website. If you have not been to the website in the last couple of months, the next time you visit, it will look somewhat different. Even though it looks different, we've tried to preserve the same functionalities of it. So it's under a Granicus platform. We had a couple goals in moving to Granicus. One, we know that a lot more people are accessing our website using their mobile devices. And our old website had a lot of content that was based on people using laptops or desktop computers, and it had a lot of text. The new website is much easier for people to navigate to different things using a phone. But all the same information is there. You just have to click a few links in terms of recent news. Additionally, we've added some buttons to the top of the screen so people can get more directly to the different resources they're trying to get to. So far, we received some positive feedback on the website. We've encountered a few small issues, but if you see any issues on the website or something just doesn't look right, please let me know, and we're just trying to get that cleaned up as quickly as possible. But overall, the transition has been a smooth one. Another item in terms of operations, the BSRB, recently we were able to reach an agreement with a company called CE Broker. So that agreement has now been finalized. We've started the process of working with the host of our licensing system and CE Broker to try to roll out those services to our licensees. As a reminder, CE Broker is a private company that partners with state agencies like the BSRB, and they have already partnered with the Board of Nursing and the Board of Healing Arts. And they provide an optional service to state agencies whereby, as an example, when we have licensees renew their license every 2 years, 10% are selected for audit. And at that time, they have to provide documentation to show they've completed all of their hours. Right now, we have to receive all that information, or it's reviewed by our licensing specialist, and then the person is notified if they have been approved or if there's an issue with their audit. Under this system, they would have, our licensees would have the ability to sign up for a free account with the eBroker, and then they would be able to upload their documentation of completion of CE hours, assign it in specific categories that we require, such as ethics. And then if they are selected for audit, instead of the back and forth, we would just have our staff log into the CE Broker portal, look in to see if the hours have been completed, look to see if the right hours have been completed, and then if everything checks out, the person can be approved for audit a lot quicker and seamlessly. There's also a nice benefit to our licensees in that they don't have to maintain those records themselves or hold on to a lot of paper if they have paper records. So there's some benefits, but we did want to make sure the final agreement made it very clear that no individuals are required to sign up for that service, although I'm encouraging any licensees to do that because I think it's a nice benefit for them. So as I mentioned, we've reached an agreement now based on our number of licensees in the different professions. What they are doing is they're going to roll this out profession by profession. And so looking at the numbers, they're going to start with professional counseling first, and then they're going to go to social work after that, and then they're going to go to other professions after that. So we will be sending out more information probably through email or putting out the information to let different professions know when it's going to open up for them and when they have the option to sign up for a free account with the eBroker. Moving to some legislative updates, there's two bills I want to make sure that you were all aware of. The first one is the passage and enactment of House Bill 2484, and that is the Social Work Multi-State Compact. That bill did pass. The BSRB was one of the primary proponents of that bill, and so we are happy to say that that bill has now passed and it's been enacted. The next steps will be, so 7 states had to pass the compact for the Rules Committee to start meeting and start to work on the operating rules for the compact. Kansas was the 7th state to pass the compact, so now this fall that Rules Committee can start meeting. In terms of other items before that can be active, there needs to be a data system so that the public is aware of who has the ability to practice under a multi-state license. There's some other things to be figured out. So based on the time frame of other compacts, I think it's probably likely it won't be operational until sometime next fall. But hopefully it'll be earlier. Just kind of depends on the work of the Rules Committee and then when they can get that data system and get everything ready to go. So there's another bill that I want to make you aware of as well that passed, House Bill 2745. And what that bill does is it exempts military spouses of active service members from occupational licensing fees. So if there is someone who is applying for licensure in Kansas and they are a spouse of an active duty service member, they no longer have to pay things like the application fee, the original license fee. And if they are currently licensed and their spouse is an active duty service member, they don't have to pay something like the license renewal fee. So this is a nice benefit to that group of individuals. This is not unique to the BSRB. This goes for all licensing bodies in the state of Kansas. There is one item I just want to make you aware of. This will impact the revenue that goes to the BSRB for operations. So when you're looking at how long it will take before we will have to start to equalize revenue and expenditures, this is something that will further decrease the revenue coming into the agency. But it is a nice benefit for those active duty service member spouses. So just wanted to highlight that for you. We're currently working with our licensees, our licensing system host to make sure that we can put in the waiver for those individuals. And this will become active as of July 1st of this year. Moving next to some items from that board meeting that did take place on Monday, May 13th. There are a number of regulations the board did a roll call vote to formally adopt. Some of these have been going through the process for a little bit of time now. They were held open for public comment, and a legislative committee did weigh in on those regulations as well. Some of these had to do with a change in the definition of the term in residence as it relates to the alternative educational requirements for licensure for some of the professions. For some of those professions, the current language in the regulations essentially says if someone applied for licensure and they received their education from a program that's not nationally accredited, there are some alternative requirements for them to meet. And one of those requirements was they had to get a certain amount of coursework physically at the school. But with the growth of online programs, the board wanted to change that definition to make things more flexible and open that definition up so that individuals could meet that in-residence definition either physically at the school or by face-to-face synchronous video conferencing. And the legislative committee that reviewed these regulations expressed some concern about the term synchronous and wanted that further defined. So the board recommended adding some language that the word synchronous would be followed by real time, which is what we were meaning by the word synchronous. So in other words, this would need to be face-to-face, but it could be face-to-face in person or face-to-face by screen, but it would need to be real time or synchronous video conferencing for some of those hours. There was one other update the board recommended from the meeting, that is for the addiction counseling profession and their educational requirements for licensure. The committee had reviewed their specific coursework, and in one of the items in the regulations, they had recommended removing the term substance use and replacing that with biopsychosocial. And the committee that reviewed them for the legislature was not familiar with that term and wanted that further clarified. And so the board basically just added further clarification that biopsychosocial would mean the biological, psychological, and social well-being of the person in that context. And so with those two changes, the board formally adopted the regulations. They were published in the Kansas Register on June 6th, and they will become official in about a week on June 21st. So as they become official, we'll be putting out some information to some of the schools concerning those new criteria, and it will allow us to license more individuals in those professions given the extra flexibility. There were some individuals who were reappointed to the advisory committees. The advisory committee members do serve 2-year terms, and when they come up at the end of their term, I reached out to the advisory committee members to see, would you like to serve another 2-year term? Are you interested in seeking reappointment? Based on your advisory committee, you did not have any individuals that were coming up on reappointment this year, but all of the individuals will come up for reappointment next year. So I will reach out to you all next spring and see if you're interested in being reappointed to continue to serve on the advisory committee. There was also an individual who currently serves on the Kansas Fights Addiction Grant Review Board. The BSRB has a designee for that board, and they have had Jason Hess serve as the board's designee for the last couple of years. When that decision was made, the board decided to have that be 2 fiscal year terms and then revisit that conversation every 2 years. And so the board decided to go ahead and reappoint him to continue to serve in that capacity and come to the board maybe once or twice over the next year to provide some further updates. Jason always provides written updates for board meetings, but he'll be attending some board meetings in the future to provide more in-depth information about that group. Additionally, just wanted to highlight 2 more things. One, the board did have a discussion about advisory committee membership. So the advisory committee policy says that members can serve up to 4 terms, and so a maximum length of service of 8 years. And there has been discussion about should members of the advisory committee be able to serve more terms past the 4 terms. And there's discussion about the value of having new members come onto the advisory committees, and so how best to handle this for individuals that would like to continue to contribute after those 4 terms. So what the board decided to do was to change the advisory committee policy. So now the policy reflects new language that says if you have served 4 terms on an advisory committee, you will need to come off the advisory committee for a gap of at least 2 years. And then after a 2-year gap in service, you are welcome to reapply for the advisory committee if you would like to continue to serve. And so
I'm going to interrupt David right there and say what that means is you guys are lifers. Just kidding.
She voluntold us all. We all heard it.
Right. And so you can serve now, instead of an 8 years of maximum service, you could potentially serve a maximum length of service of 16 years. Because it will say after a 2-year gap in service, you would be eligible for 4 additional terms. And then after that, you would have to come off the advisory committee. So, so it does kind of give individuals who would like to continue to serve the opportunity to come back. It just does give that little 2-year gap in service between when individuals are able to continue to serve.
David, I do have a question. Does that then, like once that becomes official,
That's official. Yep.
Okay, so does that mean, and this, remind me to bring this up under 6A new business?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, and this is basically just the language in the advisory committee policy. And so just to kind of give a reminder about our hierarchy, the statutes are what we follow. National, if there is law at the national level, but rarely there is for things like the profession. So on the state level, that tends to be the highest authority. So if you have statutes, those are the outcome of bills that have become law. And so if something is in the statute, we follow the statute. Within the statutory authority, agencies have the ability to, we call it promulgate or make regulations to flesh out the details within the statutory authority. So if the regulations and the statute conflict, statute is going to win, but the regulations are really helpful. And if you want to get something changed in statute, you need to propose a bill that has to go into the law. If you want to change something in the regulation, that's a process we have more control over. The time frame, though, does take a bit of time to go through all the technical steps, but that's how we can change things like what's included in the continuing education regulation or some of those other items. Under that authority, we have policies. And so we have working policies for the BSRB on our website. There's the expectations of board members policy, there's the advisory committee policy, and those are really more of like working or operating policies that the agency uses. And so the language that basically restricted advisory committee membership to 4 terms was only in the advisory committee policy. So once the board took action to change that, then it was effective immediately. And so we did update that. The new version is published on our website. And when I sent out those emails to individuals who were licensed to see if they wanted to serve on the advisory committee, I believe I included some new language in that said, basically, there's been a change with the terminology. And so any individuals who were previously on the advisory committee, as long as there's been a gap of 2 years, they can serve now for 4 additional terms. But it's a relatively new change. It's actually a very new change. So there may not be any individuals who may have previously served may have just seen the email and disregarded it because they thought they weren't eligible. That is possible. But that is a change now. It becomes effective immediately. So anybody who previously was on the advisory committee who had served 4 terms would be eligible to serve again after that 2-year gap in service. And I guess I'll just comment one more item here. So the BSRB currently receives licensing services through the Board of Healing Arts. They host our licensing system, and we use some technology from IMLO, My Licensed Office, and System Automation. However, there was a bill that passed last year, which, among other things, it created a unified enterprise licensing system for state agencies that wanted to shift to a new platform for licensing. And that is under a company called Acela. And at the time, there were a handful of agencies that said they wanted to move over to that platform. The BSRB recently changed our licensing system back in 2020, so it hasn't been that long. However, there are some functionalities of the Acela system that would be very helpful for us. The ability to have individuals apply for licensure online versus the traditional paper applications, having more of an integrated process instead of doing the application, then doing the payment through the payment portal on the website. There's a lot of things that this system would be helpful if we move to that. So we brought it to the board. The board did have representatives from Acela to give a presentation at a previous board meeting. What we learned in between that and this last board meeting was the implementation costs, which were estimated to be a little over $200,000, as well as the ongoing costs would be covered by either the state or by ARPA money, federal COVID-related pandemic funding. So the implementation cost would be covered by the ARPA money. The ongoing cost would be covered through a bill that was passed by the legislature, which provides ongoing funding for some of these licensing systems. So we currently pay about $72,000 per year, and the ability to move from that to not having to pay that same amount was a real nice benefit if that was something the board was interested in moving to. So the board did make the decision to go ahead and move to the new platform. And based on the number of other agencies that are interested in switching to that, it'll probably take about 2 years before we're fully switched over to that. And a lot of the work will be behind the scenes. You probably won't see very much of it until we switch to that. But I thought I'd give you an update now. The nice thing about that kind of a savings is right now we are operating at a deficit by design to draw down the balance in the BSRB fee fund. So we are spending more than we are bringing in. and that was done by the board back in 2019. And essentially, at some point, we will have to look at fees again to try to balance those out. But the longer that we can go before that time, the better for licensees. So that's why in my role, I try to look for things like efficiencies. And if there's opportunities to apply for grant money for different things, I try to do that. Or if there's savings we can get, I try to look for that. And so the ability for us to save that amount of money on the licensing system was significant. And it should mean that we can delay the time period between when we'll have to look at reexamining fees as possibly increases for that much longer. So just kind of wanted to make you aware of that. Now, as I mentioned, it probably will take about 2 years until we get to that point. So we will still have to pay those fees probably to operate the licensing system under our existing provider for at least the next 2 years. But ultimately, that should be a nice savings to the agency when we get to that point. So with that said, I'll go ahead and end my report and see if there's any questions on any of the things that I talked about.
Does anyone have any questions for David? I sort of have a continuing ed question, and David, I'm going to ask it, and you can tell me that this is not the appropriate forum.
Okay.
So I have plenty of CEs to qualify for my renewal. And so on the website, it clearly states that once you submit, that you can't count anything other than what was in place at the moment that you submitted.
That's right.
So if part of the CE would be something like teaching a class, right? But I had not gotten the letter from the chair prior to when I wanted to submit my renewal. Can that CE be used for the next cycle period?
And Leslie,
That might be a Leslie question.
I saw
Leslie.
Leslie click on. She might be able to answer that better because she helps the staff out with more of those hands-on type questions. So.
I don't believe so. Usually when you start your next renewal cycle, anything after the date of when your license expired would expire, can be used for the next cycle. Anything taken cannot be carried over.
Dang it.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I mean, it's fine because I usually have like 450 or something like that anyway. You know, it's like when you teach and you present and you go to these things, I mean, it's usually by the time you get through that 2 years, you have like tons of them. It's just that I hate to have it wasted because
Right.
it feels like it's wasted, right?
I understand.
So, okay, that was my question. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, let's move to the next topic, which is kind of fun, is coming up with survey items. And David sent out a couple of drafts. One of them is from professional counselors, and then the other one was part of what we covered at the psychology subcommittee meeting. So there's 2 of them to be able to look at to see which ones we like, which ones we don't like, or there are things that we want to include in our potential survey to our constituents, you know, to be able to get their input. So we're a responsive committee, right? And we're addressing so that we're getting information from them, but then perhaps being able to address some of the items of importance to our behavior analysts.
And Linda, I apologize, I forgot to mention this earlier. This morning, I did get an email from Kelly Harrison. She mentioned she wouldn't be able to attend the meeting today, but she did forward some questions that she had been working on, possibly for the survey. So
Awesome. You want to share your screen?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to share your screen?
Yes.
Show us those questions.
I'll go ahead and share those questions. Let me go ahead and. Okay.
So we should mark Kelly as calling in instead of just not absent, right? Instead of,
Yes, I can make a mark about that.
okay.
But yeah, she sent me an email earlier this morning, said that she wouldn't be able to attend, but
Oh, look,
she had,
go Kelly.
yeah, she had taken some of the questions, especially some of the demographic questions, and um, she looked at some of the questions about as far as a compact, and had a little bit different spin on it. Should a compact license become available, would you be interested in attaining such a license? If yes, answer the following questions. And she mentioned this differs a bit from the social work survey, but it's like we need to know this first before moving on to the next question. Because a no to the following questions could have nothing to do with the factors we are asking about, and simply that they would not, under any circumstance, get a compact license.
Mhm.
And then this is one of the challenging items as far as, a conceptual compact. If compact license costs X amount of money, would you be interested in moving from a single state license to a multi-state license? And so what we did for the social work one is we basically said, if the cost to practice in one state is this, potentially the cost to practice in all the different states, maybe let's just double the original cost and say for twice the licensing, you can work in all the different states. And is that something that sounds like it would be something you'd be interested in? Now, potentially, if a lot of individuals are interested in moving that direction, what we looked at for the social work is that when we got a lot of response from individuals, we were able to kind of have a proposal that was a lot less than double the license fee because there were that many people that would be interested in switching to that. But at some point, you do kind of need to have sort of at least a working number to go from. And then she put down if the requirements of the compact license are as follows, would you be eligible to receive a multi-state license? And that is one of the things, not everyone for all the professions is eligible for the multi-state license. For example, for professional counseling, they have a compact, but it only factors into the clinical level of licensees. So I would think if there's a behavior analyst compact, it probably would not include the assistant behavior analyst. But right now it's all kind of hypothetical since I haven't seen any language on one.
Yeah, one of the things, and I just want to throw this out here,
Mhm.
that when we start talking about multi-state compacts, back in the old days, we were already multi-state license credential, right? Because as a BCBA, that held value in all of the states. And then once licensing at each state level came into play, then it sort of artificially superseded and separated all of our ability to practice across multiple states without holding multiple licenses. And then now this is sort of like going back to where it was before, except for being a BCBA across multiple states, you're an LBA across multiple states, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, not, I don't know. I don't know if that's relevant or if it has any bearing on it, but since we already have this credentialing body, the BACB, that is recognized across states and Canada, what would be the value to us? Except for the fact that then we wouldn't have to be licensed in each individual state.
Yeah, I am curious. I think it would be helpful to know how many of our licensees are licensed in other states currently.
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard different reasons why people would want to become licensed in different states. Part of it is practitioner mobility, that it'd be easier to kind of move from one state to the next. I've heard it's also helpful in terms of client mobility. Start working with someone and then they choose to go to college in a different state or they take a vacation. You want to make sure that you can keep providing services to them. And there's also other individuals, like let's say they want to spend part of the year in Florida because they're not fond of the winter weather in Kansas. but they do still provide services in Kansas. And so they want to make sure they maintain licensure in both so they can work throughout the whole year. And so we've had some good questions as far as quantifying workforce regarding some of those topics.
I think
I mean,
that
I understand for Missouri, that one makes sense because we're so close, like Kansas City's so close, even Wichita's pretty close. I had to be licensed in Missouri for one, and Oklahoma, and I guess Nebraska. So what all states are included in this? You've probably said it. I'm sorry.
These questions were something that Kelly had kind of put together. And I think what she did is she kind of just took a perspective of a hypothetical compact. There's no language that I've seen for a compact for behavior analysis, but for the other professions, the idea is that they would try to get the compact passed in as many states as possible. And some of the models, I mean, the models are all different. That's kind of one of the complicating factors too. The social work one, it creates a multi-state license. And so under the social work one, if you're licensed in one state, you have the opportunity to either get a single state license or a multi-state license. And if you get a multi-state license, you can practice not only in the home state where you live, but you can also practice in all the other states that are part of the compact. Now, the other compacts, like the one for psychology, doesn't operate the same way. It basically allows you the opportunity to apply the SIPAC commission, the ability to do telehealth in different states, but you still have to be physically in your home state while you're doing that. And professional counseling operates totally different as well. With that, you have to have a license in your home state. And if you do, you can apply to any of the other compacts for something called a privilege to practice. And those states can determine what that would be as an alternative to traditional licensure, but they wouldn't be able to reject you from being able to practice there. You'd still have to pay their privileged practice fee. So.
The fact that you can recite those off the top of your head is mighty impressive, honestly.
Thank you. It's been,
I agree, Allison.
and I feel bad for the members of the legislature because they see so many of these compacts, and sometimes when people come before them, they sort of put out there that, oh, these are all the same, you know, the details to be treated uniformly. And it's like, no, these are really, really different. And so when you're talking about these compacts, some of them are set up very different. And that's why there's some good reasons for some of these technical differences.
Yeah, David, I have a question. So, in terms of those compacts, what kind of role can the state of Kansas or the BSRB play? So I feel like depending on what type of role we can play, the questions can be quite different. For example, if we are able to somehow, start and initiate some kind of compact with another state, with the other neighboring states, then I think the question would be kind of more towards, like what are the states that you would be wanting to be, living in Kansas? Like if you can choose like 3 states that you want to have a license in, where those states are going to be, and all like maybe even more specifically, like how much, like you said earlier about how much, like the different time points, but maybe like people can pay differently. If I'm practicing in 3 states, I'm willing to pay this much. If I'm practicing in more states, I'm willing to pay more. Kind of like what is that? The behavioral economics, but I forgot that term. Like you gauge depending on the price and then how interested people are to pay for those things. So we can gauge people's real interest by that. So I guess, but if we have no saying in, this is something that we're just going to be waiting for someone or some kind of other states to start, then I feel like we can just ask, like, whether you would be interested in this, and then at least we know how many would be interested without asking too many detailed questions. That doesn't really go anywhere.
Well, and so one of the things is there was some really specific questions for social work because they had the bill before the legislature this year. And one thing we did tell committees is when they asked how much the BSRB would charge for the multi-state license, we said we want to put out a survey to our licensees to gauge the level of interest, because that will help us determine a good price point for that. And so that sort of drove a lot of the the questions for the survey to kind of get to that analysis. With this, it's more of a hypothetical, and so it's not as relevant time-wise because there's not currently a compact that's already been drafted. In terms of how we get to that point,
Who is the person drafting that? Who will be that person or institution?
yeah, that's a good question. So what normally happens, recently there has been so let's see, I think it's NCSL, the National Council for State Legislators. They have a division that really has been focusing on multi-state compacts, and a lot of these have been driven by the Department of Defense, which has put up a fair amount of funding for certain professions to start coming together. But a lot of this has also been driven by different associations that have put up funding to help create, the drafting of the compact. And not all the professions have gone that direction. Marriage and family therapy is one of those where there just hasn't been enough interest to actually start the process of drafting that language. But it's usually driven by more of the associations and the state licensing boards. With the state licensing boards, the role that they play sometimes is if there is sort of a group that has come together to start that process, they can have representatives in that group sometimes to help make sure the language is looking pretty good. And then when it gets to the point to where you're trying to get buy-in at the state level, they can sort of advocate for the compact or go before the legislature and sort of testimony. But we're several steps before that for at least the behavior analyst profession.
Yeah, so really it could be something like Consaba could get with Moaba or Nebraska or Oklahoma or Colorado and gauge their interest in starting a multi-state compact.
Now there is something that may be somewhat related that we haven't talked about specifically for your survey, but each of the other professions under the BSRB has a statute on reciprocity, and there is not a reciprocity statute for behavior analysts. There is a way for us to consider individuals for licensure under reciprocity, but it's a very thin method for us to do that. There was a bill that passed about 3 years ago that basically looked at individuals applying for licensure through reciprocity who were military members, military spouses, but then it also applied to individuals who live in Kansas or those that intend to live in Kansas. And that language basically says, if you have a reciprocity statute, or if you live in a state that does not, then you can apply for reciprocity by meeting the following criteria. So it's rare, but we can apply that to certain types of applicants if they meet certain requirements. But for the other professions, we have a general reciprocity statute so that when people apply from other states, we have that in place that we can evaluate applicants. So,
and David, what sorts of variables come into play with whether you would have reciprocity with a certain state? I always wondered that. I know they do that a lot in teaching licenses as well.
Yeah. So the traditional statutes, and this changed about a year ago, but the statute for most of the professions basically said we were going to look to see if you have practiced, I think, 48 of the past 54 months. So basically about most of the last 4 years. And then if you practiced in that area for 4 years, then we would be able to have you apply for licensure in Kansas through reciprocity. That recently was changed for most of the professions where that was dropped down from 48 months down to 12 months. So if someone practiced or held a license actually in another state, and the language on that has been changed to more closely match that military reciprocity bill. So now for most of the professions, their reciprocity statutes say, as long as you've held a license for 12 months in a state with a similar scope of practice, then that is essentially the way to come in through reciprocity. The alternative to that, those statutes also say if you received your license from a state that had substantially equivalent license requirements, then you'd be able to apply for licensure without waiting any period of time.
Thank you.
And so when we have people apply for licensure in Kansas, they can go through that initial track, and most of those people haven't passed the licensing examination yet. but for the other ones who practice in other states, a lot of people apply for licensure through reciprocity, and those applicants usually go through a lot faster.
So two things. Number one, this conversation is a little bit off the possible survey. So I kind of want to direct your guys' attention back to maybe that the survey for licensed psychologists, because that one's, I think, more closely aligned with what we currently have in play. But maybe I don't know who the note taker is, but if we could put this like under on the agenda, like where we want to talk about topics for this next year, because I just want to make everybody aware that there's other licensing bodies out there or credentialing bodies out there. And if we move down a reciprocity route, we could have, you know, Wisconsin that accepts all these other different types of credentialing bodies for behavior analysts. And if we have a reciprocity agreement with Wisconsin, then that means that we accept their licensing of that behavior analyst, regardless of what their certifying body is.
Yeah, and based on the profession, it's not always apples to apples, and
Right.
so yeah. You mentioned
Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, you mentioned the survey questions for licensed psychologists. I went ahead and shared my screen.
Thank you.
That advisory committee met earlier this week on Tuesday, and so as another example, we might provide some of the questions that they talked about for a possible survey as well.
So for this committee, and I can speak to this because I'm on this committee as well, we separated it by type of question. So we would have demographic questions, practice questions, supervision, disciplinary, and then some other stuff, right, that we hadn't quite gotten to yet. So just by category. So I like that Kelly provided some examples. I think was hers based off the social work one.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if we can kick this to next time and have everybody come up with like, having it broken out by category like that. Do you think that's a good idea? And then if so, what are some of the questions that you think would be important to have under each one of those categories? And I think it could just be topic ideas. I don't know if you have to come up with your actual survey questions themselves, because I think we can, do that. But I think the first thing we need to do is get content. Like, what do we think it's important? What do we want what data do we want this survey to generate? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So hopefully that's only going to take 15 minutes of your time to come up with just a couple of things for our next meeting. And then we can pull this forward, David, and put it under on our agenda for next time.
Linda, can I ask a really quick question?
Absolutely.
So what is the purpose of this survey? Maybe I have missed it. Is it just trying to get a better understanding of everything, or there's a more specific purpose?
Well, that's what I just said. It's like, what kind of data do we want this survey to generate? Like, what do we want to get out of this?
But
Right.
it sounds like this is a survey that's for multiple disciplines. So there must be a purpose already there.
Yeah, so I think I can help answer that question, or at least at a viewpoint. The Social Work Advisory Committee, they were asking questions partially because they had the compact bill in front of them. They also had a question on there as far as reducing the requirements for continuing education, because that was something their advisory committee was currently discussing. And so part of it could be to help the work of the advisory committee. Some of the other work was basically looking to see, like professional counseling. One of their questions was, do you see any areas where you think practitioners could use more training or continuing education? And so they were kind of looking for areas, and then based on feedback from providers, perhaps that could drive the work of the advisory committee to recommend some future changes to some of the requirements based on the issues that were spotlighted there. We took a outside the box creative approach to jurisprudence. There's a catch-all question in one of those surveys that is kind of like, if you think there's anything else helpful for the advisory committee to recommend as a possible change to statutes and regulations, there might be something that someone would offer up that maybe we could take that and run with it. That maybe hasn't been something we've even thought about, but maybe it's something that another state has tried. And I tried to learn from what other states and bring them back to the advisory committee. But if other people are aware of that too, that's good information.
That's very helpful. It sounds like it's very much what we, as the committee, we can decide what we want to do with this information.
Yeah, and I mean, there is some general data that is just helpful to have for the purposes of understanding the profession. But what I hope, some of the questions at least point to is the future work of the advisory committee, or if there are significant ways in which the public is being harmed, it's helpful for us to be aware of those things, so that way it can drive the work of the board to protect the public in a better way. But that's just one perspective. If other individuals kind of provide insight on that too, feel free to speak up.
Thank you.
So the plan today is not to necessarily have a discussion, but to prompt everyone to come to the next meeting with some questions. Is that my
Yeah,
correct?
questions, thoughts about what kind of data we want to generate from this? What's our outcome? What's our goal? What do we want to do? Right? What kind of feedback do we want to get from the field?
And each
What
profession,
kind of information?
yeah, each profession is coming up with a separate survey if they want to do that for their profession. And the general framework is, we've been looking at having about maybe no more than 4 or 5 demographic/practice related questions, and then about 10 questions where we really get at certain topics. So that way we keep it as a fairly brief survey, so we don't have people who open it up and say, oh, that's too many questions, I'm not going to answer. So.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Not hearing anything. We can move on to new business and our advisory committee membership. David had sent out, and this is interesting, David, because in the meantime, David had sent out a request to people that are licensed in the state to ask if they would be interested in serving on this committee, because right now we have 10 members and we can go up to 12. Is that right, David?
Currently, there are 8 non-board members in the advisory committee, and you can go up to 10. So you could add as many as 2.
And then, so from that, so David had sent that out because right now everybody ages out at the same time, right? And so there's going to be some of you that want to stay on, some of you that may drop off. We can, bring in more people at the time. But the thought was that if we got interested people, we'd have at least 2 members that are overlapping with our current terms. Excuse me. But in the meantime, I had asked one of my staff that work with me here that's a BCBA, and they said they didn't get the email. I think he's an LBA.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering, so how did you generate that list from that? I wonder if it went to his previous email, because he's relatively new. He's only been here about 6 months.
Yeah, I put together a message and I provided it to my clerical staff, and I asked them to send it from the BSRB inbox. Anyone who's currently licensed as a behavior analyst or who's licensed as an assistant behavior analyst. And then to provide that back to us with a resume or CV and then a letter of interest. but we didn't get any responses back from people this go around.
Which I thought was
I-
interesting for our field.
I also, if it went to everybody, I also didn't get an email. So
I didn't either.
I haven't changed my email though in 14 years. So
Yeah.
That is helpful information because it was unusual. The last couple times that we've sent something out, we've received at least 7, 8 from different.
Mhm.
So, one option, I wanted to bring it to you and just kind of let you know that's what I heard back from our clerical staff. As an option, we could go ahead and try to send it out again. And then if you could encourage people by word of mouth, that would be helpful sometimes too. Or we could look at later in the year sending it out, after the school year has started and people are more aware of their schedules. But if several of you didn't receive it, and that's a problem, I want to talk to our staff to kind of figure out if there was a technical issue, why people weren't getting it, because we do want to let people have the opportunity to nominate themselves for consideration.
So I didn't get one either, but
oh, sorry, Linda, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I didn't get one either, but I thought I didn't get one because I was the chair.
Yeah.
David, if it gets sent out in a way that I get it, I'll post it to Grassroots, and make sure that that group knows about it too.
Okay. Would you like me to go ahead and have that then sent out again, in between this meeting and the next meeting? And then, that would be easy for me to do, and I'd be happy to do that, if that would be helpful. Yeah, you half of your committee is in their middle of their first term and half of your committee is in the middle of their second term, but you all do come up at the end of the next term in 2025. And so there's 8 of you, but you still have, everybody who's on the advisory committee right now still has at least 2 more terms of eligibility. So
Like I said, you guys are lifers.
But yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Is that kind of consensus of the advisory committee to go ahead and?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I suggested to David is he might want to wait to send it out instead of now until once, so that everybody gets it in September, so that everybody knows what their schedule is going to be like for next semester. The only problem with that is that even if they started in September, their term backdates to July 1st. So they would lose that part of their tenure on the subcommittee. So if you all don't think that it would make a difference if they got it now versus after summer break, then there's nothing to prevent us from sending it out now. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Any preference?
My vote would be to send it out now.
Well, since she's the only strong vote in the room, let's send it out.
And David, I don't know if there's some way you can confirm that it was sent, because it's kind of sounding like nobody received it.
Yeah.
And so just if you can email the board or the committee and say hey, just sent this out, or in some way, because we can't recruit people if we don't know that the email was sent out either.
I agree. I'll go ahead and send just a couple of messages to some of you just to kind of see after that gets sent out.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ashley may not have, or whoever sent it out may not have sent it to committee members. She may have excluded you from the email. So you can ask about that. We'll
follow up with her and see if she went ahead and just kind of removed you. Because that may have been part of it too, that if you're already on the committee, but we'll have her send it to everybody this go around. That way you can kind of distribute that to other people. And usually I talk to people about this for the advisory committee recommendation process. Sometimes people are a little leery of recommending people for the advisory committee because they don't want to feel like there's a conflict. But I understand, in the roles that you play, it's not going to be uncommon. You're going to know people who probably apply for the advisory committee. And while you always have the ability to recuse yourself from any discussion or vote, just because you know somebody, you don't need to recuse yourself. If you think the knowledge you have of them and that they might be a good advisory committee member based on what you've known about them or seen, then that's helpful information in my opinion. So.
Mhm. In the past, David, like Mike Wassmer used to be a member of this group. Would it be, do we want to just send it to our licensees, or do we send it to people like Mike again? I don't know. That's just a question.
So I'll tell you what, I will send it to our licensees because that's really what we have jurisdiction over. It's usually the licensees and applicants, and in the past we've sent it to our permanent licensees. But if you receive that message and you want to forward it to other individuals, that's perfectly fine too. And
Okay.
I'll collect anything that I get back from individuals, and then I'll share the applicant materials with all of you. So
Okay.
for the discussion.
All right. Well, I just threw that out there, and his involvement might have been more important back early on when all of the legislation and statutes and rules and regulations and everything else were being crafted. So it was just a thought. All right. Anything else on that? All right. So then, can I move B down, discussion on regulation of artificial intelligence, and talk about C first?
Sure.
So, one of the things that we've talked about and that David has mentioned is, we've updated the website, et cetera, et cetera. And, and to increase transparency and to clearly delineate between each one of the professions. David and the staff were thinking that it might be good to add a description of what each profession is to the BSRB website. What do you guys think of that? Yep, I see several heads shaking, David.
Yeah, we've heard from some of our public members of the board as well that for individuals who haven't received education or training in these areas, there are certain terms of art, and it may be difficult for them to understand the role of the different practitioners in these professions. And so we have language on our website. There's a FAQ section for each of the professions, but it's geared more towards applicants and licensees. And this has come up a few times over the years that it might be helpful to have sort of a general description of each of the professions from the perspective of the audience members being members of the public, so that we could have just a short paragraph maybe that would help them understand a little bit better about the professions we regulate.
So that could be another takeaway from this meeting, to add to next meeting would be if everybody came up with 2 or 3 sentences, or, if you get really excited about it, if you want to write 2 or 3 paragraphs about our profession and what sets us apart, and what you should be expecting from somebody that's licensed as a behavior analyst in Kansas. And then we can wordsmith them and mush them together and get something to David and Leslie to be able to consider for the website. Are y'all good with that? Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. All right, that was an easy discussion. Now, is everybody ready to talk about artificial intelligence? Alice, you want to talk about artificial intelligence?
I have too much to say, but I'm not sure whether this is the appropriate place.
Maybe I can frame the start of this discussion. So the board met back in May, and the couple of the items the board wanted to refer to the advisory committees. One was the topic of adding some language on each of the professions. The other was how can the advisory committees assist the work of the board in terms of being helpful and protecting the public by looking at what is our role in terms of regulating artificial. We have unprofessional conduct standards. We have laws in terms of what practitioners are permitted to do and unauthorized practice of the law, but it's all geared towards a person providing services. And there have been questions recently about, chatbots that are providing guidance or apps that people are creating, and what is our role as a licensing agency in terms of making sure the public is protected for things like that. So in some ways, we're trying to play catch up. In other ways, a lot of the associations are similarly trying to put together task force or groups to kind of have these discussions. And so board thought it'd be helpful for each of the advisory committees to start a conversation on this topic, and then ultimately, hopefully, have some recommendations to forward back to the board on ways maybe the board could be supportive of, tackling this topic.
And I think it's important too. I read something that said, or I was talking to some, I can't remember, and they were talking about, it was not behavior analysis, but it was counseling. And they said that they were engaged with AI during the session, and that the AI was able to make warm, kind, and empathetic remarks to them when they were, talking about their problems and whatnot. And so, but it was not a human being, right? It was AI. And so, when you look at that, gosh, I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but when you look at the algorithms that have to go into it, developing a platform that's able to learn as it goes, right, and interact with a human being, it's like, are we opening that up to perhaps doing more harm than good at some level, should the algorithm take it down the wrong path, right? For us, like what would be the negative ramifications of using AI in our profession? So Christy just sent something out. Here's chat.
You don't have to read it to everyone. I just
Okay.
used AI to write a definition of behavior analysis. I
Oh,
sent it to you.
okay. Yeah, but see right there, I mean, we use it, right? I mean, we're using it in our work. So what are the implications? And we're at the cusp of AI becoming ubiquitous in everything that we're engaged in. What kind of protections do we want to put in place with regards to our field?
There were some really good conversations at ABAI this year about artificial intelligence, and they have some like very eye-catching presentation title. Are AI gonna take all the jobs from behavior analysts and things like that? But I think one thing that I feel like I'm very embracing AI, and I think that it's empowerment for people to be able to use AI when they are not able to access or cannot afford to have access to a therapist or evidence-based suggestions or things like that. I think one thing that would be kind of concerning, or I think a lot of people are still trying to figure it out, is how we can make sure that the privacy of the patients are being protected. And well, in the meantime, there are AIs are everywhere. Like there are so many like ABA companies that are using AI and using AI to write notes, to storage data, to do all those type of things. So there's a lot of information there. So, I mean, there was one psychologist who gave a really good talk on AI. Like, I think she's one of the chair or something of the digital mental health of APA. But I mean, I don't know what exactly what we can do here, but I feel like it will be a good thing to keep continuing having conversation about it.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Or where we even want to go forward with this discussion, right?
I
Oh, sorry, Christy, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Pam.
I don't know that I'm going to add much to the discussion other than I was just thinking in terms of we're making a list of areas about AI to address. So far, it sounds more like AI as the mode of service delivery. I also think we need to think what happens in terms, I don't know whether the word sanction, what happens when something, if it was AI delivered, went awry, then what are the ramifications and how to recoup that and whose fault, like, I don't know the right way to talk about it, but like,
Right.
whose fault is it or what do we do, that sort of thing. I bring it up because some of the discussion around the university has to do with, students use AI to basically write assignments that they didn't write themselves, and it's a form of academic dishonesty, that sort of thing. Part of the problem is having sophisticated enough technology to actually prove that they did that with sophisticated technology to create that sort of thing. And so sometimes it's unclear how to assess what's happening, I guess, when the technology is so sophisticated.
Mhm.
I like your point because are we going to get to the point, and this is silly, that we're going to start licensing different AI programs to be sanctioned deliverers of something, right? I mean, because if we're responsible for the protection of the public, how do we protect the public
Yeah,
from?
that's why it crossed my mind, is that the phrasing of consumer protection and the protecting the public form of this body. Yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah, and just as a technical reference, so for the behavior analyst profession, there's a statute 65-7504. It's about denial, suspension, or revocation of a license. And it basically says the board may refuse to issue, renew, or reinstate a license, limit, condition, revoke, suspend a license, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, upon a finding that a licensee or applicant for licensure has ... Under the unprofessional conduct, it says each of the following shall be considered unprofessional conduct for a licensed assistant behavior analyst, a licensed behavior analyst, or an applicant for either. And then it has the list of those. So if we're talking about regulating this topic area, at least our statutes and regulations point to a person. And so if we're looking at AI doing this independently, there's a questionable, there's at least a question as far as if we have the authority currently to regulate the artificial intelligence. Now, I think there's a really good legal argument that, you have fruit of the poisonous tree. So if you are someone who develops something and that thing goes on to do something else, there is a chain tying back to the person if that person was a licensee or applicant. But it does raise some interesting issues if our current language is good enough to apply to where artificial intelligence is going, or if that's even our role.
Absolutely.
What other possibility? Sorry, just before I forget it, throw down on the list if somebody's making a list. From the standpoint of protecting the public, maybe some sort of antecedent approach back to an educational approach. Is there something that the group could do or facilitate or promote, or recruit help with educating the public about what AI can do and what it can't do, and that's with respect to behavior now?
I like that approach, and I also just want to add that totally agree with David, because even now, like when you submit articles to a journal, it will say that ChatGPT cannot be listed as an author because it cannot be liable for anything. So you, as the author, takes all the responsibilities. And one more thing is that I think it might be interesting to add this topic to the survey and just kind of see, like, you know, whether any of the behavior analysts actually use ChatGPT or any other type of AI for their practice.
That's a good suggestion, Alice. I think that should be added to the survey. That's a good point.
I think I'm wondering if, in terms of like unprofessional conduct, that might be something that we add, kind of like telehealth, in regards to like you're still held to the same guidelines as when we were paper pencil and in person face to face, and this still counts in these contexts as well. You can't use AI without like clinical oversight. You have to protect confidentiality. You have to make sure these measures are in place if you're using this technology to serve clients.
Yeah. So I think this continues to go on for future discussion, David. I just noticed that we're down to 4 external members, right? Because can we not do any more official business?
Right now, we have 5 members of the committee that are present, so you can't take any official vote.
Right.
But you can still go through information, like informational purposes is fine.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because we had 2 people drop off.
Mhm.
Okay. So, so a question would be, how if, because I know that I'm prompt dependent. And is there any way that you could send the notes out like a week before the next meeting to everybody on the committee?
As
And
far as
then
the minutes from the last meeting?
from this meeting,
Yes. Mhm.
can you, yeah,
I think has Linda froze for all the rest of you as well? Okay. Well, I think she was asking for the draft minutes of this meeting to be sent out about a week before the meeting. So I will go ahead and do that as something to help out the members of the committee. And we'll see if she's able to rejoin. Okay.
was
Linda,
that everybody or just me?
you froze, but you're back now. So
Okay.
Yeah.
It shut down totally.
I disconnected too, so I wonder whether there's something to do with the QMed.
Yeah,
maybe it's the AI.
it's
that
the AI one.
No, but I appreciate that, Linda, and I will send out the draft minutes about a week in advance so people can kind of review those and be prepped for the next meeting. So
Yeah, because that's what it'll do. It'll prompt everybody to say, oh yeah, I need to come up with a couple of questions and a couple of, for the survey, and then, yeah.
Okay.
And then come up with a sentence or two or paragraph or two for what we would like to have on the website. And then, so I think that sort of dovetails into the discussion of topics for 2024. I think we continue with our survey development. What do we want to do with those data? What do we want to do with AI? And then also just kind of continue to think about the potential of a multi-state compact and what that would mean for our field. Would it be beneficial, not beneficial? So I think David and Leslie, if we kept multi-state compact on as a topic of conversation.
Okay.
And then anything else? So if we come to the next meeting with some other pressing, or even maybe not pressing, just things that we can do to improve the scope of what we do and how we can interface more effectively with behavior analysts out in the field. And David, I just want to end by saying, unless anybody else has anything else, I love your idea about the jurisprudence activity. I just think that is taking the principles of what we do, right? The basic science of human behavior, and putting it to good use on a state level, right? I mean, there's got to be a study in that, you guys.
Well,
Like, how, we should send out a pre David program questionnaire about, what behavior analysts actually know about the laws that govern them in the state of Kansas. Then we introduce David's idea, and then we do a post test and see what they know, what they learned. There's got to be a study.
Well, I appreciate that, Linda. And it's funny, when I applied for this position almost 4 years ago now, one thing I did tell the board is I want to be very upfront. I was not educated in any of these areas for the 7 professions, and if that was going to be an issue, wanted full transparency. But in taking on this role, I've tried to do my best to kind of learn about each of the 7 professions, and I feel like I have really benefited from getting to learn at least the entry level so far for the professions, and it has influenced the work that I'm doing in my role. And I think that's only going to continue to improve. So learned a lot from all of you, and looking forward to continuing to learn concepts that I can apply in this role as well. So I appreciate those comments. So.
There you go, guys. We've got our marching orders.
And Linda,
So David,
well,
in your executive director's report, each meeting, if you could provide us an update on your progress towards becoming a behavior analyst, that would be helpful too. Your action steps.
I will keep that in mind. So, and I apologize, Linda. I did not include this in the draft agenda, but we do have a member of the advisory committee coming off the committee. Jackie Lightcap has been the public for the advisory
Jackie, no.
And she's not seeking reappointment to a 2nd term, and so May was her last board meeting as a board member, and this will be her last meeting as an advisory committee member for the behavior advisory committee. So wanted to just say thank you again to Jackie. We did a little kind of thank you to her at the board meeting, and just wanted to let all of you know that she will be coming off the advisory committee. But
I didn't even put the 2 together. Right? So sorry, Jackie. I should have.
That's okay. No problem.
Thanks, Jackie, for your
Thank you.
support.
Thanks for
I have learned a lot. I have also learned a lot about behavior analysis. So thank you for the education.
I've got some good programs you could go to. I bet Pam could talk to you about those. Anyway. All right. Well, is there anything else on here that anybody wants to talk about before I suggest we end 15 minutes early? Nope. All right. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
And actually, Linda, since we don't have quorum, we can't take a motion to adjourn. We'll just
so we're going to be in meeting.
I think the meeting will just end organically.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.